You're tuned in to More Living with Jim Brogan, broadcast live from the Brogan Financial Studios at News Talk 98.7, where old-fashioned values, expert knowledge, and genuine understanding come together to give you the retirement straight talk you deserve. Jim's a former National Advisor of the Year recipient and a financial educator, and he's here today to talk about how you can live out the best years of your life. Jim and the Brogan Financial team have been helping retirees and pre-retirees across the Southeast for over 20 years in their pursuit of financial independence. You can reach them during the week at 865-862-6800. So sit back, relax, and get ready to learn, because More Living with Jim Brogan starts now.
Welcome to the third Saturday of October. This is More Living with Jim Brogan, where it's all about living the best years of your life your way. We're coming to you straight from News Talk 98.7 WOKI. Such an exciting time of the year. I think of a lot of things. Of course, third Saturday, that's time for Tennessee, Alabama. I know I'll be there this afternoon for that big game. And you know what? As the seasons change, the fall weather sets in, you're likely to start thinking about your plans for the fall season. And part of that is in the preparation for the winter season. It's crucial to address certain parts of your retirement financial plan. Now, the annual cost of living adjustment to Social Security payments was just released last week. So it's important to plan around the change and how it affects your income in retirement. How does that affect your income taxes in retirement? And with holiday spending coming up, it's important to understand the impact of inflation on your budget, even with the COLA increase on the horizon, COLA, cost of living adjustment. In addition, you may be surprised at how much you could save with an optimal tax plan. But adjusting your plan before the year end is crucial in the tax planning process. Once we get into January, your ability to do tax planning for 2024 is pretty much gone. I mean, there's a few things you can do with IRA-type contributions, or if you're self-employed, a solo 401k contribution. But for the most part, once the calendar clicks to January 1, there's just not much you can do, because the things that have happened. You cannot undo them for the most part. Without thoughtful retirement planning during the winter months, you may not be able to minimize your tax income. So we're going to really dive into these things. So we're going to talk about four main topics today. We're going to talk about the cost of living adjustment for Social Security. What does it mean? What could it mean for you in the future? Can you keep up with inflation with the Social Security COLA? We'll talk about the effect of inflation on your holiday budget. Don't underestimate the benefits of year-end tax planning, so we'll have some good tax planning tips. And finally, I want to talk about the critical importance of the mental side of retirement. I think retirement planning is a mental game just as much as it is a financial game. So a key element to retirement planning this season is understanding the upcoming cost of living adjustment, or COLA, in Social Security income. This adjustment could be larger or smaller than you expected, so it's crucial to plan around the increase to optimize your income level. Let's delve into how to prepare for these changes and what can you expect in the long term in terms of cost of living adjustments on your Social Security. So 2024, the year we're in right now, the COLA was set for 3.2%. Now, you may remember in 2023, it was a record 8.7% boost in Social Security income. And, of course, that was due to, the really, really high inflation we had around that time. So then it went up 3.2% for 2024. The upcoming 2025 COLA is a little less generous. It is expected to be around 2.5%. So the average monthly retiree benefit goes up by about $50 on average, but it's 2.5%. Now, how would that affect your taxable income, number one? Obviously, that's going to raise your number. The thresholds, the main thing it's going to do is the thresholds that determine how much of your Social Security income is taxed, they're not adjusted for inflation. So, for example, if you're a joint filer and you have on your it's called provisional income, and they include half of your Social Security income towards your provisional income, and then it's the other things that show up on your tax return. All right, and prior to deductions, it's not taxable income. It's called provisional income. If you're married jointly and you're over $44,000 of provisional income, then you'll pay up to 85%. You'll pay income tax on up to 85% of your income. Well, that threshold, $44,000 for a joint filer, and it's $32,000 for a single filer. But that threshold was determined in the early 80s, and it's never been adjusted for inflation. So income keeps going up. Benefits from Social Security are going up. The tax brackets also go up. You know, when we move from a 12% to a 22% bracket, for example, or a 22% bracket to a 24% marginal bracket, those brackets also go up every year based on cost of living adjustment. But the Social Security taxation has not been adjusted in roughly 40 years. So it's just something you got to be aware of. Now, it shouldn't drive you into higher tax brackets, because as I mentioned, the brackets do also go up. The biggest thing we need to be aware of with taxes is that the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act expires the end of next year, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in the third segment today. Now, the record boost that we had in 2023, 8.7% boost in Social Security, and then 3.2% this year, 2.5% next year. One thing I get asked is it makes people tempted to go ahead and file to get the benefit of those inflation increases. Jim, do I need to be drawing my benefit in order to take advantage, in order to get that bump? And the answer is no. Because, see, the standard benefit, your full retirement age benefit that you get, which is going to be between 66 and 67 years old, depending on when you were born, that benefit is going to still go up even if you're not drawing it. So the cost, your Social Security benefit, so I'm 55. I just turned 55. My oldest daughter just turned 24. 24. Well, my full retirement age benefit also went up 8.7% in 2022, and it's going to go up 2.5% in 2025. My daughter, that's 24, same thing. So you don't have to be claiming. So just be careful you don't rush out to claim thinking you have to do that to get these cost of living increases. Instead, you need a filing strategy that fits your own individual circumstances and optimizes income in accordance with your other income sources and considers things like taxation. You've heard me talk about the sweet spot, which is between retirement age and age 73 or 75, because that's when you have to start taking those required minimum distributions from your retirement accounts and you're fully taxed. There's a sweet spot there because you can control a lot of your taxable income. You have more control of your income taxes in retirement typically than any other time of your life because you're not earning income. Your investment plan has an impact on investment taxation, and where you draw income from has an impact on your tax return. You have a lot of people have a lot of control over those things, but you lose some of that control when you have those forced taxable payments when you turn either 73 or 75. By the way, if you're born 1960 or later, you'll have to start taking money out of your retirement accounts at 75. But if you're born before 1960, then you'll have to start at age 73. So now the reality is these Social Security benefits are going up because everything costs more, right? I mean, we're seeing everybody's seeing an impact. They're seeing their housing, their food, their medical costs. Those three things make up 80% of a retiree's spending. And those three things, housing, food, and medical costs, have been significantly impacted by inflation. So are these adjustments that you're getting, are they going to be able to keep up with inflation? From my vantage point, no, they're not. Historically, we've seen almost a 2.5% per year increase in the Social Security benefit. Historically, inflation is 2.5% over long periods of time. So they do match up there. However, we always assume a lower Social Security adjustment. And a lot of that is because the rules of how they calculate the cost of living adjustment were changed right around the end of the Great Recession, 2008-09. And so, we use something like 1.5%. The bottom line is your cost of living adjustments are likely not to keep up with inflation. And so you've got to consider that impact on your retirement plan over time. So part of that equation is optimizing when you draw Social Security. There are a lot of complexities involved in maximizing that monthly Social Security benefit. Obviously, if you claim early, you get less per month, but you have more time for payments. Claiming later, you get larger payments. As a thought, the life expectancy tables that were designed by Congress in the Social Security tables were developed in the early 80s. So it's been over 40 years. Well, are people living longer now than they were in 1984? Sure. But they've never adjusted. See, when they came out with what's your benefit at 62, what's your benefit at 67, what's your benefit at 70, and you see all those calculations, again, that was determined, that was set in the 80s, and the idea there was that over millions of people, it would be neutral, budget neutral to the federal government. Meaning you may draw early, I may draw late, somebody else may draw at 66 or 67, and everything in between. When you add it all up, the tables, the life expectancies, the way they set those rates was designed to be budget neutral for the government. But people are living longer now. So you need to worry about what things cost when you're 88. That doesn't mean you should delay necessarily, but I see, honestly, too many people that just rush to file that Social Security benefit because they feel like they want to get it as quickly as possible. And part of that, Jim, I'm not going to care how much income I have when I'm 88. Well, but you will. And, your spending will gradually slow down over time, but then you're going to have increased medical costs in the last, kind of at the very end of your life, it's going to kind of click back up because of medical costs. So I think all of this is so critically important. It's critically important to understand how spousal and widower benefits work. That's all part of the claiming process because, as an example, the spousal benefit stops increasing once you hit your full retirement age. There's no benefit to delaying the spousal benefit to age 70. However, to draw the spousal benefit, like for my wife to draw the spousal benefit on me, I've got to be drawing. So if I've decided to delay, that impacts our strategy. And then what are your other income sources? How's your money invested? How are you structuring the income? If you're delaying Social Security, that means you're going to need increased income elsewhere until you start drawing Social Security. Does that all make sense? And it's important in those cases to protect that income, that higher need for income in the early years of retirement, and be careful that you're not betting on the stock market. Now, we're going to get to our first break, and when we come back, I want to talk about the effect of inflation on your budget, some things you can think about, especially as we approach the holidays. So stay with us. This is More Living with Jim Brogan here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI.
Welcome back to News Talk 98.7's Brogan Financial Studios, where Jim Brogan is coming to you live with important news and advice to help you achieve your dream retirement. Get ready to learn and live. Here's your host, Jim Brogan.
Welcome back to More Living here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI. This is Jim Brogan, and we're talking about cost of living adjustments with Social Security, the impact of inflation. The holiday seasons can be such a special time to enjoy our moments with friends and family. We give gifts to those we care about. Whether you're going apple picking on a crisp autumn morning or planning a trip for Thanksgiving or Christmas with your family, you'll certainly have to budget for these experiences, right? And with inflation still present, it's crucial that you understand how to adjust your budget and spending expectations this winter. So let's talk about the basics of inflation. Understanding how inflation erodes the buying power of money over time. I call inflation the silent killer of retirement income. It's like cholesterol. So it sneaks up on you, and then you wake up one day 10 years from now or 12 years from now, and you're like, where'd my income go? And that's the power of inflation. Now, everybody's worried about inflation now. The reality is 3 years ago, when inflation was 2%, it was hard for me to, it was harder for me to get folks at the classes I teach and things like that to understand the power of inflation because inflation was so low. But even at 2%, it creeps up and you've got an issue. So let me just give you an example. The average inflation rate historically over a long period of time is about 2.5%. Now that includes the late 70s when inflation was double digits. If you back that out, it's a little bit lower. But here's the bottom line: if you make $100,000, let's use a different number. Let's say $80,000 a year. If you need $80,000 a year of income right now in year one of retirement, then in 20 years at 2.5% inflation, you will need $131,000. It's a 64% increase that you'll need in those 20 years. Put another way, if you need $100,000 of income to pay expenses, you'll need to be drawing $164,000 in 20 years, or you are losing income. Okay, so with the inflation we've seen in these last couple of years, everybody's worried about it. What does it mean for your budget? Well, number one, you can cut back on non-essential purchases during inflation, right? The other thing is to save money in accounts with higher interest rates to counteract inflation. You just shouldn't have a lot of money sitting in a savings account at the bank making less than 0.5%. Think about this. If you've got $50,000 at the bank with high yield savings paying 4.5%, that $50,000 is worth, in a year's time, that's $2,250 of interest that you are walking away from. Get that money in your cash needs, your emergency fund. Get those in high yield savings or in a treasury money market fund, something like that. They're still paying around 4.5% even with the rate increase. Now, if and when the Fed cuts rates more, which I expect that they will, that rate will go down. But we are in a now today, and we're just increasing on increasing. So, going up 2.5%, you say, Jim, well, it doesn't feel like that. Well, that's because that's compounding on a 9%, 8.5%, 9% inflation rate the year before. So it just starts growing. But the bottom line is, it's unusual people to earn more on high yield savings. Just make sure it's FDIC insured or it's Treasury type money market. So get that cash working for you a lot better. Keep an emergency fund for unexpected expenses. Now, why is that so important, Jim? Why is it so important to have an emergency fund for unexpected expenses? Well, here's why. What's the number one way to beat inflation over time, over a period of time, like 10 years? Well, if I have an emergency, what if the stock market is substantially down and I need money? And I need $25,000 or whatever it is, or maybe I need a new HVAC system. I need 10, whatever it is. If I don't have an emergency fund to pull that from, I've got to sell investments that are down. And now I'm going to do the opposite of what I should be doing. I'm going to be negatively impacting my wealth because I've spent that money. It's never, ever going to come back again. So we've got to be cognizant of the importance of an emergency fund. But the good news is, there are great options out there for high yield savings. And then I get asked all the time, Jim, what's the best way to beat inflation? Should I own more gold? I'm getting that a lot because gold's at near all-time highs, right? There are certain things that can be buffers when we are in inflationary environments. The thing is, it's not always 100% correlated. It's not if you own gold during inflationary times, you'll make more, you'll keep up with inflation. That's not always the case. But there are ways to hedge your portfolio to have holdings that typically would help in a highly inflationary environment. But the bottom line is, over long periods of time, the stock market's the best way to beat inflation. All right, so, I could sit here and talk all day, but, we don't invest in the market, and we don't take a risk with investments for what they might be worth a year from now, because it's completely unpredictable. The market could be down in a year, and inflation's up. But the market beats inflation long term, or has in the past. So you've got to create time on your side where any money you have at risk, you're focusing on at least 4 years down the road. My preference would be a little bit more, so that you can have a high expectation of growing your money to beat inflation over time. But what if the market goes down 30% next year? Well, you've got to recover that loss, and you've got to make more to beat inflation. Well, you need time on your side to do that. So that's the key, is you've got to have an emergency fund. You've got to have protected income in the early years of retirement. And then recalibrate your budget as needed. We should be tracking how much we're spending and where it's going. What items in your budget have increased the most in price? And how could you adjust your spending patterns to avoid some of those costs? Maybe you should be buying more in bulk, or purchasing looking more for sales. And then stay informed about the economy and inflation trends. Ignoring inflation can lead you to be a step behind and end up overspending your budget periodically or continuously on a month-to-month basis. And it could really spiral and lead to financial hardship. And then, as I said, over time, the investment income needs to grow to cover costs, and to do that, a diversified portfolio that is growth-oriented but also more diversified can help reduce the effect, the impact of short-term risk, which is a reality when we take risk with our investments, is short-term losses. And then overall, you need to review and adjust your financial goals in light of inflation, and re-examine your strategy periodically to stay a step ahead. Okay, so, it's important to have a plan to beat inflation. I've covered some ideas of how to do that. I've also talked about the impact of inflation on your income. Now, when we come back, don't underestimate the benefits of year-end tax planning. So stay with us. This is More Living with Jim Brogan here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI.
Welcome back to News Talk 98.7's Brogan Financial Studios, where Jim Brogan is coming to you live with important news and advice to help you achieve your dream retirement. Get ready to learn and live. Here's your host, Jim Brogan.
Welcome back to More Living, right here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI, where it's all about living the best years of your life your way. Hard to believe we're in the fourth quarter and actually getting in the latter half of October. And, as the year draws to a close, we're met with an event that often brings us stress: tax season. Many overlook the importance of year-end tax planning, and it can result in missed opportunities for your lifetime savings. Year-end tax planning, in my view, is crucial. It's your last shot at adjusting your finances to minimize your tax liability before the new year rolls in. As I mentioned, when the calendar clicks over to January 1st, there's very, very little you can do to impact your taxes. Pretty much retirement account contributions for an IRA, if you're self-employed, a solo 401k or something like that, you're kind of limited there, because anything that happened in 2024 has happened. So and there's a few other exceptions. By planning ahead, you can identify potential deductions and credits. You can strategize your income and expenses. When it comes to deductions, when do you pay your property taxes? With the itemized deduction being as high as it is now, over $25,000 for a joint filer, less people are itemizing, but, you have some flexibility. I can pay my upcoming property tax bill. I can pay it now before the end of the year, or I could pay it in January or February because it's due by March 1st. So I may delay it this year. Next year I may pay it. I may delay it and pay it in February, and then next year pay it in December, and then I get two of them. My charitable giving can impact that if I bunch my deductions. Bunching deductions can be a very effective strategy, but you have to plan that stuff ahead of time. But ultimately, it's to reduce the overall tax bill and make the most of our hard-earned money. So let's dive into what you need to know, some ideas about year-end tax planning. One is obviously contribute to retirement accounts. The retirement account tax benefits when you do a deductible contribution, so not a Roth, but a Roth is tax-free in the end. It's just a Roth doesn't help you with your taxes this year. So all the other types of retirement accounts, IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, the limits have gotten so much higher now. You can put up to $23,000 in your 401k and deduct it straight off your income tax. And if you're if you're 50 years or older, you can do $30,500. If you happen to be one of those fortunate people that are eligible for both a company plan at work and a 457, like if you're a teacher, work for the state, and you've got a 403b and a 457, and you're over 50, you can put $30,500 in your 403b and $30,500 in your 457. And all of that comes off taxable income. Now, I realize many of you may be thinking, well, Jim, I need that income. But sometimes people don't. If they have a higher earning spouse, or maybe the one spouse is drawing Social Security and a pension, it's just something you should be aware of. Now then, always be sure you make a last minute estimated tax payment. If you're not paid in enough, by the time you get to April, you could end up owing a tax penalty. And the fourth quarter estimate is due by January 15th. So if you anticipate you're going to be owing taxes and haven't had enough withheld, investment taxation is not withheld. You get a dividend, a capital gain on a sale, or a capital gain distribution from a mutual fund, nothing's deducted from that for income taxes, so then you have to make estimated payments. And of course, if you have a CPA, be sure to get with your CPA or enrolled agent, to plan how you should be doing those estimated payments, or adjust your withholdings on your other income sources. You should definitely be organizing your records for tax time. Makes the process so much more manageable, and it ensures you don't miss important deductions or credits. If you're going to do it on your own, get a good tax software. If you have any kind of complication, I like using a professional, an enrolled agent or a CPA or other tax preparer. But, TurboTax, a good tool. There's some other good ones. Certainly, if you have a choice and you're working, deferring bonuses can be a good way to impact this year's tax return. Now then, of course, you obviously have to then consider what's the impact on next year's tax return. But if you're getting an unusually large bonus, you may want to defer that. Or what if you're going to retire next year? At the end of the first quarter, you're not going to have nearly as much earned income. You may go, if you can defer that bonus, that'll help you in that tax equation. Certainly donating to charity. I mean, I've done segments on the power of giving in your financial plan. I think it should be a part of financial planning. And being smart about how we give, we can have a bigger impact. Because if we're smart about how we give, Congress has given us a lot of tools to minimize taxes on charitable gifts. And the biggest thing is, don't always just do a cash gift. Because when you do a cash gift, number one, you have to be itemizing your deductions in order to get the value of that deduction if you give a cash gift. Now, if I give appreciated stock, let's say I had stock that appreciated, I bought it 30 years ago and it's gone up 500% or something, then I can give shares of stock. Most churches and charities will accept that. I can give shares of stock to the church or charity, and when they sell it, I avoid any capital gains tax. Anytime I can give something to church or charity without ever having to pay income tax on some of that money, See, $10,000 in your bank, you've a cash gift, you've already paid all the tax on that money. But if I have money that I don't ever have to pay tax on and I get the charitable deduction, that can be even more powerful. And certainly once you're 70 and a half, you can give directly from an IRA as a qualified charitable distribution. Now the check has to be made out to the charity or the church, and it comes straight off your taxable required minimum distribution. So taking advantage of all of those things is critically important. But let's talk for just a second about some of the most powerful long-term tax planning strategies. One is going to be loss harvesting. You know, this is usually a good opportunity when you have mutual funds. You can sometimes have a gain on a mutual fund in terms of how much you invested and how much it's worth now, but actually have a capital loss if you sell it. Bond funds are notorious for that, especially over the last few years, because, you know, when interest rates went up, bond prices went down. So a lot of bond funds were paying higher yields than what their price was returning. So in other words, as they were paying dividends, you know, every time there's a distribution from a mutual fund, the price of that fund goes down, and you're taxed on that distribution. So you could have gains over time and still have a taxable loss on the mutual fund if you sell it. Now, beware, if you sell at a loss and want to buy it right back, there's some rules. You can't do that for 30 to 60 days, depending on when you purchase the fund and some other things. But gain harvesting, planning to trigger capital gains, can also be a very effective strategy. You know, we have a 0% tax bracket, and it's on long-term capital gains up to pretty high numbers when I go over these kind of details. And then, of course, Roth conversion planning. Income taxes are going up the end of next year. Now, we don't know what will happen beyond that, and Congress could change it if we get a new, you know, depending on how this election turns out. But bottom line, Roth conversion is saying I'm going to pay the tax now and then be tax-free later. And where that can be powerful is if your income tax bracket later in life is higher than it is now. That's when Roth makes sense. If your income tax bracket's going to be lower in retirement in the future, Roth conversion doesn't make any sense. You don't want to pay a tax at 32% today when it might be 25% in the future. What you want to do is you want to pay the tax when today it's 22% and it's going to 25, and then when you hit RMD age at 73, maybe it's going to 28 or 33%. You know, I'd rather pay 22% now than 28 or 33% later. That's when Roth conversion can make sense. So when we come back, I do want to mention I've got a tax planning class coming up in November. It's a one-night class at Pellissippi State Community College. I'll have some detail about that. I'm also going to talk about the mental game of retirement. I think retirement planning is a mental game as much as it is a financial one. So stay with us. This is More Living with Jim Brogan here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI.
Welcome back to News Talk 98.7's Brogan Financial Studios, where Jim Brogan is coming to you live with important news and advice to help you achieve your dream retirement. Get ready to learn and live. Here's your host, Jim Brogan.
Welcome back to More Living here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI. I'm Jim Brogan. We're talking about organizing your finances. We're talking about things like inflation, cost of living adjustments for Social Security. We've talked about year-end tax planning and how important it is. I did mention there, I've got a one-night class, Tax Planning for Retirement, coming up at Pellissippi State Community College. It is on Tuesday, November the 12th. November the 12th, 6:30 p.m. It's a one-night class, 2 hours, 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. I'm going to try to give you as much as I can, information-packed 2 hours on tax planning. You know, we have typically, as I said, more control over our taxes in retirement than at any other time in our lives. And the reality is, if we look at our top expenses in retirement, for many of us, income taxes are our number one expense in retirement, even more so than health care. That's not true for everyone, certainly, but for many it is true. So again, if you go to PellissippiTaxPlanning.com, you can get more information. It is on Tuesday, November the 12th. Pellissippi State Community College. Go to PellissippiTaxPlanning.com. You can download a syllabus and click to register. Now, retirement is more than just financial planning. It gets so much of our focus, the financial planning, and it is critically important. But it also involves navigating the emotional and psychological transition from a career life to retirement. And I recently read an article from federalnewsnetwork.com, and there was an author, Tom Timmon, and he's a seasoned journalist, and he shared his journey toward retirement and the mental adjustments that he encountered in his own life. So he describes how retirement planning becomes an inevitable reality, even for those who enjoy their work. You know, with 6 months left before his official retirement, he started reflecting on the psychological shift, likening it, kind of seeing, you know, if you see a distant speck on the horizon, like if you're at the beach and you see a distant ship on the horizon, and as it gets closer, it turns out to be a massive container ship. And that massive container ship is a ship of decisions, paperwork, new routines. So it's important that preparing for retirement isn't just about paperwork like Social Security and Medicare decisions, but also managing the emotional aspects of leaving a fulfilling career. You know, many of you find joy in your work. So, you know, you're kind of at the top of your game maybe in the last few years of retirement for many of you. Now, I know some of you don't feel that way. You want to be retired more firmly. But many people feel like, you know, in those last 10 years, we're at the top of our game. But there can be a challenge in finding new purpose. You know, retirement isn't just about stopping work. It's about finding new ways to stay engaged and connected. We weren't put on this earth to sit around. We were put on this earth to work and do stuff. Now, that doesn't mean manual labor or working for a paycheck, but it could be anything to stay engaged. It could be taking time to pursue playing a musical instrument or playing the piano. You know, for me, you know, smoking meat is a great hobby. I like to get out and travel. You know, writing and writing something, keeping a journal, but certainly spending time with family. So you need to maintain social connections, and you got to be careful you don't dwell too much on past memories. Now, it's also important to have a balance, a sense of balance in your life, the importance of balancing work and personal life. You know, many people who fail at retirement rush back into work. And in this article, Tom questions the idea that career success is the only path to fulfillment and suggests that a meaningful retirement requires imagination and balance. Now, I would disagree with him that career success is not the only path to fulfillment, because that kind of ignores our greater calling. What are we here to begin with for? You know, I believe we're here, number one, to have a relationship with our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, okay? So that's why we're here. Now, we're here to serve people. But you have to have a sense. So fulfillment doesn't just come from success at work. Likewise, you can have a lot of balance in retirement and serve people in different ways. Could just be serving your family. Okay, but balance is so critically important. You've also got to plan for the unknown. Even with meticulous planning, retirement can come with a few surprises, right? You know, Tom had recalled in his article how he almost reserved vacation time through his work scheduling, only to realize he won't need to schedule vacation time after May of 2025. So planning for the transition into retirement, the mental transition, I think it's personally just as important as the financial transition. And how are you going to create routine? How are you going to, you're going to lose a lot of your social network. I mean, that doesn't mean you're not going to keep in touch with those people, but you're certainly not going to be seeing them on a daily basis. How are you going to recreate social connection? That's very, very important. It's a good idea, I think, to schedule some routine things. You're going to have to establish a new routine, schedule some things, especially in those first 6 months. Maybe every week, 3 times a week, you do X. Okay, so, just schedule some things. So I think thinking about that mental transition is so critically important. Don't let it sneak up on you, and then it's too late. Now, I do want to mention again, I think that, my third segment there, we talked about the importance of tax planning as we get closer to the end of the year. So this class at Pellissippi State is a great opportunity for you to learn more about income tax planning, which again, for many of us over our lifetimes is the number one expense we'll ever have. It's at Pellissippi State Community College. It's on Tuesday, November the 12th at 6:30 p.m. You can go to PellissippiTaxPlanning.com to get more information, PellissippiTaxPlanning.com, and you can learn all about tax planning and all kinds of different strategies that you may not even know exist. So I would love to see you there. And I do want you to think, like, if I think about what the most challenging tax issue that I have encountered with working with a client, I mean, there's been a bunch. But a lot of the opportunities we see that are unique, I have someone who gave a client that gave a large charitable deduction, a large charitable contribution a few years prior, 3 years prior to meeting me. And there's limits on how much we can deduct on our tax return based on our adjusted gross income. There's limits to the deduction. We can carry forward the deduction. So we can have the deduction year one, but then if we have excess deduction, we can carry that forward for 5 more years. So he had tremendous opportunities to use that deduction against some income planning opportunities moving forward. And those are the kinds of things that a lot of people don't think about. Also, your charitable giving. I have a client recently that decided they knew what they were going to be giving over the next 8 or 9 years, and they have a very, very highly appreciated employer stock, and huge gains if they sell it. So they donated some of it to shares to a donor advised fund. They get the deduction now. They didn't have to pay tax on it, and then we can also manage it more effectively and not be worried about it being in just one stock. So today we talked about all of these elements of financial planning because greater wealth provides for more living so you can live the best years of your life your way. Thanks so much for tuning in. Thank you, Wayne, for engineering the show. Thank you to Jill for helping produce the show. Have a blessed weekend on this third Saturday in October. Go Big Orange. Let's stem the tide. You've been listening to More Living with Jim Brogan here on News Talk 98.7 WOKI.
The views expressed by Jim Brogan and his guests are not that of Cumulus Media. Any discussion of financial, legal, and tax planning strategies is not intended to be individualized advice and is general in nature. Always consult with your advisor for advice specific to your needs. This program's content does not represent a recommendation of any particular security, strategy, or investment by Jim Brogan or Brogan Financial Incorporated.